Hello and welcome to our program today. We're delighted you're here, especially if you are interested in self-awareness. Today I am here with Yashi Srivastava, and let me tell you a couple of things about Yashi before we dive right in on how not to know thyself. You know that expression, but we're going to do a different take on it today on today's Believe Show. So let me tell you a couple of things about Yashi. Yashi Srivastava is a coach and a teacher and a writer who's passionate about helping people cultivate inner peace. When she began her career teaching computer programming, her lifelong fascination with the human mind led her to become a people development professional. And in her career spanning over 10 years, Yashi has helped many clients transition to more fulfilling careers, to parent with greater calm and balance, and to become more authentic, effective leaders. You can learn more about Yashi on her website, which I'll post into our links. In fact, I will copy it right now to not forget to post it in there. So before we start, let me just say hi. Hi, Yashi. We're delighted to have you on here again.
Hi, Sonia. Yeah, it's good to be back here.
So today we're going to be talking about how not to know thyself and about self-awareness. Let me start broadly. What would you say? What is your field? What is your industry?
Right. So I'm a coach, like you said. So coaching is primarily what I do. And I also have a background in positive psychology. So I work at the intersection of the two. So essentially coaching people to help them live happier, more fulfilling lives.
And within this field, what is it that you believe that others in this field would not agree with you on?
Yeah. So let me begin with something that most people would agree on, and that is that self-awareness is important, right? The expression "know thyself" has been around for thousands of years, and we often hear that it's important to be self-aware, and self-awareness is the foundation if you want to create some changes in your life. Self-awareness is where you begin. So that's most people would agree with. Now, there are a couple of things that I discovered about self-awareness in the last few years, which I think more of as myths about self-awareness, and they may come as a surprise to some people. And so one of them is that when you think about self-awareness, it's usually understood to be this turning attention inward. So look inward, pay attention to your thoughts and feelings. And that's what self-awareness is usually understood to be. What I've come to believe is that self-awareness is a more complex concept than that. And it's not just about looking inward, but there is more to it. So that's one myth. And the second myth is that one of the best ways people think that you can use to become more self-aware is introspection. So again, looking inward, analyzing your thoughts and feelings. Why am I feeling this way? Why did that happen? And why did I respond that way? And so introspection is considered to be the most effective way to become more self-aware. And turns out it's not one of the most effective ways. It works to an extent, but it has its limitations. And so if people want to become more self-aware, they need to go beyond introspection.
So I absolutely want to hear more. I'm completely in agreement with you about the baseline and what our common beliefs are as executive coaches, as people development professionals. Yes, we have heard across the board, self-awareness is important. One of the best ways to become self-aware is to check in inwards and then to do some introspection. So please tell me, what are we not seeing in thinking about it this way?
Right. So let me begin with the first thing, and that's just the idea of self-awareness. And I said that it's more complex. And so one of the things that I've come to believe about self-awareness is that looking inward is a part of self-awareness. That's something when we learn more about our thoughts and feelings, it definitely enhances our self-awareness, but to an extent. In addition, some other things that can enhance our self-awareness. An example is when we read psychological literature. So for example, you and I both went to the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program, right? During that year, learning more about the psychological science, about how the human mind works, what are some of the strengths and limitations that people have in general, not just as individuals, but as a species, those are things that enhanced my self-awareness. And so when I was writing my thesis on this topic in the master's program, I categorize self-awareness as having two different levels. So one is the individual level of self-awareness, which is often what we think about when we look inward. And then there's the universal level of self-awareness, which is when we learn more about how the human mind works and how people in general work. That is something that also adds to our self-awareness.
So in fact, are you saying that one component of self-awareness is, as we've read and thought about it, and the other is understanding self-awareness more.
Yes, that's the perspective that I came up with. I have another example, and the overall point that I'm trying to make here is that self-awareness is more than what it is usually understood to be. And so another example, there's this book called Insight by Tasha Eurich that came out a couple of years ago. And she categorizes self-awareness as internal self-awareness versus external self-awareness. So internal self-awareness is, again, how it is usually understood to be, looking inward and learning more about our thoughts and feelings. External self-awareness is becoming more aware of how other people see you. And so that is another aspect of self-awareness that's really important, which is often overlooked. And so it's more complex than just looking inward and noticing your thoughts and feelings.
You'll see that I was on mute because I was typing. I was just typing in the internal versus external self-awareness, which I'll put on the screen in a second. That is totally different. So external self-awareness, sometimes we might think of something like how are people perceiving us as social intelligence or other ways of maneuvering the social landscape. But you're actually saying, hey, that's part of your own understanding of yourself. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
how do we do that? How do we use our external self-awareness? Is that the right term?
Yeah.
How do we do more of that?
Right. Yeah. And that actually brings us to the second myth that I was talking about, introspection versus other ways. And so introspection, one of the reasons it doesn't work as effectively as we usually think is because the essence of introspection is looking inward and noticing what we are thinking and feeling, right? And with introspection, we only have access to the conscious part of our mind, which is a significantly it has significantly lesser real estate, let's say. There's a large part of our mind that simply we don't have access to it. So no matter how much we look inward and introspect, we just can't see what happens at the autopilot, automatic level in our minds. And that's the reason why introspection by itself is not enough when it comes to becoming more self-aware.
So a little bit the elephant and the rider, the John Haidt, we can see that rider, but we can see that whole unconscious and the one that motivates us implicitly. Elephant.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So in that metaphor, there's the elephant, which is a subconscious mind, and there's the rider, that's a conscious mind. We only have access to the rider, but essentially the elephant is what is driving most of our behavior, and we don't have much control, or we don't know what's going on with the elephant at a conscious level all the time.
So what should we do to find out more about what's going on with the elephant?
Right. Yeah. So there are a couple of there are various different ways that work more effectively than introspection. And I say that I usually tend to combine introspection with other ways of becoming more self-aware. So to answer your question that you asked earlier about external self-awareness, right? One of the biggest ways that we can learn more about ourselves in terms of external self-awareness is through feedback. And this is, again, something that we see all the time in our work as coaches, right? The 360 assessments are often a source of useful information for people to have new insights about themselves. The challenge with feedback is, though, that it can be difficult to get people to give you honest feedback. It is also difficult to receive honest, critical feedback, right? And it's especially when how you see yourself is significantly different from how others see you, and how others see you is in a poorer light than you see yourself, then it becomes really difficult to accept that feedback and incorporate that feedback. But if we truly want to become more self-aware, we need to be more open to feedback, to receiving feedback, and maybe being conscious about whose feedback do we take in and whose feedback do we let go of. So we do have some choices that we can exercise there. We don't have to take all feedback and internalize everything, but it is important to look at feedback from a neutral, objective perspective and reflect whether this is something that actually happens, if it's actually true, because a lot of times other people have insights into us that we don't.
Let me offer for the people who are with us today, please type in any questions that you have to Yashi. This topic is totally new to me, so you can see that I'm asking questions constantly, but please type in additional questions you have. And please also let us know in the comments, have you done this? I'll put this up again. Have you explored external self-awareness? So I've certainly done 360 assessments, which I found were mind-boggling, just so interesting, so much different than I would have gotten by talk therapy or by coaching, by having a coach. So have you tried external self-awareness, and what other questions do you have for Yashi? Because I feel like I'm a fountain of questions for this topic. So here, okay, Yashi, you've come on this show and you've said, here's a myth about self-awareness. And I've totally bought into that myth. Self-awareness is checking in with yourself. Then you said one of the best ways to get around that is to not focus just on the elephant. Sorry, not to focus just on the rider, but to focus on the elephant. And then you've said, so I agree with that, but I say how? And so you're saying, okay, to focus on the elephant, get feedback. And yes, 360 is great. I also love your idea of get feedback that you're going to trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
all of it's like layer upon layer of, hey, you're not in a bubble. If you're thinking self-awareness, you're not in a bubble. It's almost like the bubble's bigger. It is how it comes across to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that metaphor.
Whom should we get feedback from? How do you determine who people are? Is it necessarily the manager? Is it your direct reports? Is it your spouse? Whom should we trust to get feedback from?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for each individual, it may vary. Like, for example, I know there are people in my life who might be able to give me feedback that might be helpful, but they would be too critical. And at this point, I'm still on that self-awareness journey where I'm hesitant to ask them for feedback. So I tend to choose people who I know I can trust, who I know will be kind in delivering even critical feedback, and who I believe that they have my best interest at their heart. So, for example, my husband and some friends are some examples that I have. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be just people in your family or friends. So, for example, it could be coaching. So in coaching, at times when I hire a coach to help me with some stuff, he or she might make an observation about me, something that I'm not seeing, and I can trust that feedback because it's neutral. So that's another thing. If the person giving feedback doesn't have vested interest in what the feedback that's being given, I tend to trust it more, and I think that might be true for a lot of people. And feedback can be in a variety of domains. So, for example, before I came to know about this self-awareness research and everything, I was really hesitant to share my writing with anybody. I just would be crushed if I received any critical feedback on my writing. But after learning that in order to become a better writer, I need that feedback. I need to learn how I can grow as a writer. I've joined Catherine's Writers Workshop, for example, and I actively seek feedback on my writing because it helps me grow and develop. And so I think it also involves a bit of a mindset shift when we look at feedback as an opportunity to learn and grow, which is something that a lot of people understand at an intellectual level, but it's harder to implement. But if you value self-awareness, then that is one of the best things that you can do for yourself.
And how do you check in whether that feedback is accurate or not? Or should you assume that it's accurate because it came either from trusted sources or, like you say, an executive coach that's a neutral source? How should you assume whether it's accurate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with time, when you receive feedback like that, you will be able to see patterns. When more than one people gives you the same feedback, and it's not something that you usually think about yourself, then there might be some merit to it. And so by no means am I saying that anybody who gives you feedback, you just take it in. You can ideally get some distance from it where you are not in an emotional state when evaluating whether the feedback is applicable to you or not. And then also look for patterns as to how many people have said that to you. Is that true? Does it show up in your behavior? Like, ask them for examples of the feedback that they're giving. So you have the right to investigate a feedback that comes in as a surprise to you.
Yeah. Some of what you're saying about feedback and trusting your inner trusted circle and then maybe going wider and wider, it reminds me, have you either read or heard something that Elizabeth Gilbert has said about her writing and how she shares it? So she says exactly what you're saying about self-awareness, that she'll share her writing with her tightest, closest knit group. And then eventually, as it's more and more ready and more the final product, she'll kind of go outward in these circles. So it sounds similar to what you're describing about self-awareness more generally.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wasn't aware of the Elizabeth Gilbert method that you're talking about, but it actually, when you were talking about it, reminded me of Brené Brown, and how she talks about this, like, you should have a 1 inch by 1 inch post
Do
it
you know
when you
what?
just
I actually, I might be mistaken. Maybe it was Brene Brown. I had a sense that it was Elizabeth Gilbert, but it might have been Brene Brown. I hope I didn't.
possible.
But if I did, it's one of those two. Yes.
It's okay. It happens. A lot of these ideas are repeated. But the one that's coming up for me is she says that have like a 1 inch by 1 inch post-it and write the names of people whose feedback matters and let the rest go. So it's usually what she's talking about is having a narrower group of people that that you share your story with, or I'm not sure of the exact details of it. Maybe it was not exactly feedback related, but she's talking about having a trusted circle that you can actually open up to more fully.
That's different. So maybe I still had the Elizabeth.
Yes.
I have another related feedback thing that I wonder if you've seen, because she's certainly in our circles. One of our professors was Angela Duckworth. And something that I've seen when she's been interviewed, her say is whenever she gives a talk at any group, at any company, at any organization, at the end, she'll always ask the organizers, what is one thing I can do better next time? So in a sense, she's always gathering feedback.
Yes.
What do you think of that as a method
Absolutely.
of awareness?
I think that is such an excellent demonstration of how people who are good at it do it. And it actually reminded, I used to work with a leader many years ago who, whenever he gathered feedback, he was always looking for things that he could do better. He said, I already know, I get enough feedback about the things that I'm good at, but I want to know what is it that I can do better, because he was so passionate about growing as a leader. And so I think that's a great example of how people do it well.
Even my high school theater teacher used to do that with us. Kevin Heelan, our high school theater teacher, used to say, okay, we know that you're doing this well, but what do we need to do better? And that almost positions you at a higher level. Like, okay, we got it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
The self-awareness journey. Can you speak for a moment about that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please, Sanya?
You mentioned the self-awareness journey, and you said I'm in the earlier parts of my self-awareness.
Yeah.
What kind of journey, or what does it look like?
Yes. Yeah. I think this more consciously started about, 8-9 years ago, when I was going through a really challenging period in my time. And I kept coming across this idea that, our thoughts have an impact on the outcomes that we live with in our life. And so when I came across this idea, I started asking myself, so what are the thoughts that I'm having that are leading to all these challenges in my life? And that was when I consciously became aware that, okay, I need to be more aware of what I'm thinking. And that's how the journey started. And initially it was trial and error. But when I went to study positive psychology and learned about happiness, for me, self-awareness seemed really foundational to the topic of happiness, but we were not really talking explicitly about self-awareness. And so I decided to write my capstone on this topic. And I went in thinking that I knew what self-awareness was, that I knew the connection between happiness and self-awareness. But I was quite surprised by some of these findings that I'm sharing with you. So this was 4-5 years ago that this happened. And after that, it's become more conscious, and I've definitely gotten humbler when it comes to self-awareness. And I know that it's going to be a lifelong journey. I don't think I will reach a stage where I will be fully self-aware. So yeah, it's been a journey of humility for sure.
And I'm just starting today in October 2020, given what I'm learning from you. So thank you. We have two questions that I love to end with. One is, what is a thought or an idea that you hope people will take away from what we've talked about here today?
I think that the thought or the idea is that self-awareness is a more complex concept. And so if you really value self-awareness, it's more effective to start expanding your definition of self-awareness and looking at it differently.
Mm-hmm. And is your capstone in the UPenn Commons?
It is, okay, yeah.
So I'll get that from you, and I'll add it into the link of this so that people can read more about it.
Yeah.
And then the final question is, if you could, so about this topic or even more generally, Yashi, if you could snap your fingers and everyone in the world were to take one action, what action would you want that to be?
To start really internalizing the idea that feedback is a gift. It's an opportunity to learn and grow. And so to not shy away from the initial discomfort that comes with feedback. I think that if I could wave a magic wand, that's one of the things. I would have people be more open to receiving feedback.
Yeah. Thank you so very much. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us. We've been talking about self-awareness and specifically how not to know thyself, other avenues. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, Anya. It's been great. Yeah.
We're back every day, Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific, and look forward to you joining us later this week. Thank you. Thanks.